Welcome to Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
Have you ever had that specific moment?
Yep.
Maybe it's late at night, 2 a.m., the house is quiet, and you just can't sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You're lying there doom scrolling through LinkedIn or Twitter, or maybe flipping through some bestseller you bought at the airport.
Yeah, the one you swore you'd read.
Exactly.
Oh.
And suddenly you stumble upon what looks like the Holy Grail. It's a thread or a quote or just a snippet that promises to fix everything.
Oh, I know this feeling.
It's so bold, so confident. It says, if you want to be a billionaire, you must wake up at 4 a.m. Or the only thing standing between you and a six-pack is intermittent fasting.
Real leaders eat last. That's another one.
Yes, it's the blueprint. It's this seductive promise that there's some secret code to life, a hidden algorithm, and somebody else has already cracked it.
And for just $19.99 or a click, they'll hand you the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly. And the logic, it seems flawless because, well, it worked for Elon Musk or worked for that fitness influencer with the perfect lighting and the perfect apps.
Right. The proof is right there in the picture.
So you think, okay, this is it. I found the missing piece. So you try it. You set the alarm for some ungodly hour. You starve yourself until noon. You try to time block every second of your existence down to like when you brush your teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens? A week later, maybe two, if you're really stubborn, you just crash.
It all falls apart.
You don't feel optimized. You feel exhausted. You don't feel rich. You feel burnt out. And the worst part, it isn't even the fatigue.
No.
It's the shame.
Yeah.
You feel like a total failure because the blueprint that supposedly worked for everyone else, it just led you straight into a brick wall.
It is a universally frustrating experience. I think, every single person listening to this right now has a physical shelf full of books or like a digital folder full of bookmarks that promise some massive transformation that just, it never arrived.
Never came.
And you're so right about the shame. That is the most insidious part of it all. The natural reaction when proven advice fails is to internalize it.
Mm-hmm.
You immediately think, I didn't have enough discipline, or I didn't want it bad enough, or even worse, I'm just not cut out for success.
It feels incredibly personal. Like, clearly, I'm the broken variable here. The system works, so I must be the glitch.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we are going to flip that script entirely. We're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating and frankly a liberating concept called the context trap.
Yeah.
We are analyzing a source text titled The Context Trap, Why Universal Advice Fails.
Mm.
And the core argument here is going to be a massive relief to a lot of people, but it's also going to challenge the way we consume information, fundamentally.
It really is. The premise of this whole deep dive, it isn't that self-improvement is bad or that learning from successful people is a total waste of time.
Right. We're not bashing the whole idea of getting better.
No, we aren't being nihilists here. We're not saying nothing matters, but the source argues that we are missing the hidden mechanics of why advice works for one person and then fails disastrously for another.
And it's not what we think it is.
It's not about willpower. It's not about grit. It's about context.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we're conditioned biologically, maybe, but certainly culturally, to look for the universal rule. We want the law of gravity for success. We want an input that guarantees an output every single time. A plus B equals C.
We want the instruction manual.
Yes. But this deep dive suggests that seeking out those universal rules is actually the trap itself. It's the thing that keeps us stuck.
Right. Our mission today is to take you, the listener, from being a passive consumer of advice. Just collecting quotes and habits like Pokemon cards, hoping one of them is the shiny Charizard that saves your life.
I love that analogy.
To becoming an active filter. We need to look at a mechanism the source calls context stripping. We need to understand how advice gets manufactured, packaged, and then sold to us.
And we are going to focus heavily on two specific areas that came up in the research, which I found just fascinating. Timing and incentive.
The two ghosts in the machine.
They really are. They are the things that almost never get mentioned in a motivational Instagram post, but they change the outcome of the equation entirely.
They do. And by the end of this, we want to give you a strategy. We aren't just going to deconstruct the problem. We're going to build a solution. The source outlines a framework. Ignore, adapt, or discard.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to know exactly which lever to pull the next time you get a piece of unsolicited advice from a coworker or a parent or Well, or a podcast host.
Love it. So let's dive right in. Section 1, the core mechanism of failure. The source uses this term, context stripping. Sounds a bit technical, maybe a bit academic.
Yeah.
What exactly are we looking at here?
So context stripping, it's the process that happens when a complex life lesson gets turned into a product or a soundbite.
Okay.
Think about it in terms of like data compression. You know, when you take a beautiful high-resolution photograph, something with millions of colors, shadows, depth, and you compress it into a tiny pixelated JPEG.
Right, to email it or put it on a website from like 1999.
Exactly. You lose data. You lose the nuance of the color. You get what are called compression artifacts. The image is recognizable, sure, but it's not the reality.
Okay, I like that analogy. So you're saying advice is a compressed version of reality.
Precisely. Real life is messy. It's a complex system just full of specific details. If a CEO turns a struggling company around, that success is built on thousands of tiny specific variables.
Like what?
Well, the interest rates at that exact moment, the specific personality of their VP of sales, the local labor laws, maybe their biggest competitor went bankrupt the week before.
Wow.
It could even be their own personal health or the fact that they have a stable marriage supporting them at home. That is the context. That is the high-resolution photo.
Right. It's 1,000 moving parts working in a specific synchronization. It's an ecosystem, not just a to-do list.
But here's the problem. You can't sell 1,000 moving parts.
Yep.
You can't tweet 1,000 moving parts. It's too much cognitive load for the audience. So to make that lesson shareable or viral or sellable as a book, the advice giver has to strip away all that messiness.
Have to simplify.
They have to shave off the edges until they're left with this smooth, catchy slogan like hire slow, fire fast, or wake up before the competition. They take a complex narrative and they turn it into a bumper sticker.
I see. So the advice becomes a packet of information. It's efficient, sure. It travels well. It looks great on a slide deck.
But it's hollow.
It's hollow.
Precisely. And the source calls this the universal rule trap. We love universal rules because they feel safe. They feel like physics. If I drop an apple, it falls. That's a universal rule.
Yeah.
Gravity doesn't care if you're rich or poor or what year it is.
Right. It's predictable.
We want to believe that if I wake up at 5 a.m., I succeed is the same kind of immutable law. It reduces our anxiety. We don't have to think about our specific situation. We just have to follow the instruction manual.
But the problem, clearly, is that your career or your relationship, it isn't a gravity problem. It's not a simple system where the laws of physics apply equally to everyone.
Correct. Gravity acts on every object the same way, but a career strategy acts on every person differently because every single person is a different system. And this is where the source draws a direct line to that feeling of frustration we talked about in the intro. When you apply a clean rule to a messy reality, friction is inevitable.
It's not just likely.
It's guaranteed.
Can you give us a concrete example of this friction? Because I think we've all felt it, but it's sometimes hard to articulate what's happening.
Sure. Let's take the classic advice. Never give up. It's ubiquitous. It's on posters in every high school gym. It's in every single sports movie.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And in a certain context, say learning to play the piano or training for a marathon, that is excellent advice. The mechanic of learning requires repetition and pushing through plateaus. But let's strip the context and apply it to a business venture.
Okay, let's say I'm running a business.
If you are persisting in a business that is objectively failing due to a fundamental market shift, say you're selling DVD players in 2015, or you're trying to launch a travel agency when everyone is booking online, that universal rule of never give up is actively harming you. It is draining your bank account, your confidence, and your time. It's keeping you from moving on to something that might actually work.
That's a brutal distinction. In that case, the virtue isn't persistence. The virtue would be pivoting or even quitting.
Exactly.
But the universal rule doesn't allow for that nuance. The rule just says persist, no matter what.
Exactly. And the frustration comes from that gap between the simplicity of the advice and the complexity of your actual life. You blame your execution. I must not be trying hard enough. I need to grind harder,
Right.
rather than realizing the instruction manual was written for a completely different machine.
That makes so much sense. We're trying to jam a square peg into a round hole, and when it doesn't fit, we blame the hand holding the hammer, not the fact that the peg is the wrong shape.
That's a great way to put it. We assume the advice is true, and we are flawed. The reality is usually the opposite. We are complex, and the advice is overly simplistic.
Which brings us perfectly to the next big point from the source. The danger of mimicry. We are obsessed with copying successful people.
Obsessed.
You see these articles everywhere. The daily routine of Elon Musk, the diet of an Olympian, how Warren Buffett reads 500 pages a day. Why is this so dangerous? I mean, shouldn't we model success? Isn't that how we learn? We look at what works and we do that.
In theory, yes. Modeling is a fundamental part of human learning. Kids model their parents. Apprentices model their masters. But let's look at the concepts of environment and personal constraints that are mentioned in the text. This is where context stripping gets really, really dangerous.
Okay.
When you copy a routine, you are copying the visible action. You are not copying the invisible support system.
The invisible support system. Break that down for us. What are we not seeing?
Okay, let's take the billionaire morning routine again because it's such a perfect example of this fallacy. You read an article that says, a certain tech mogul starts every day with 2 hours of meditation, followed by a high-intensity workout with a personal trainer, followed by a sauna session and an organic breakfast prepared by a personal chef, all before 8 a.m.
Sounds amazing, honestly. I'd love that morning. I feel relaxed just hearing about it.
It sounds idyllic. It sounds like the key to clarity and focus, so you, the listener, decide to copy it. But let's look at your environment. Let's say you have a 9-to-5 job with a defined start time. You have a 45-minute commute in traffic, and let's throw in a personal constraint. Maybe you have a 6-month-old baby who wakes up 3 times a night, or you're caring for an elderly parent, or you live in a small apartment with thin walls where you can't jump around at 5 a.m.
No, that routine is physically impossible.
Yeah.
You'd have to wake up at 2 a.m. to even try to fit it all in.
It's not just impossible, it's destructive. If you try to force that billionaire's routine into your parent with a commute environment, you aren't going to get clarity.
No.
You're going to get sleep deprivation. You're going to get anxiety because you're rushing through the meditation to get to the gym. You're going to get resentment toward your family for interrupting your sacred time.
Wow.
The billionaire has a staff. They probably don't have a commute because they fly private or work from home. They might have a night nurse for their kids. Those are the invisible variables.
It's like looking at the tip of the iceberg and ignoring the massive mountain of ice underneath that's actually holding it up.
Yes.
We see the meditation, but we don't see the millions of dollars in infrastructure that allows for the meditation.
Exactly. And the source implies something really interesting here. Successful people often don't even realize how much their environment contributes to their habits. They suffer from a bit of blindness, too.
What do you mean?
They think they're successful because they meditate for 2 hours. But the reality might be that they can meditate for 2 hours because they are successful. The causality is backwards.
That is a huge insight.
Yeah.
We confuse the result with the cause. You know, there's an analogy I want to throw in here that I think fits perfectly.
Go on. I like where this is going.
It's like wearing someone else's prescription glasses.
Okay.
If I have perfect vision or a specific prescription, say I have astigmatism, and I hand you my glasses and say, these work amazing for me, everything is crystal clear, you have to try these, and you put them on.
I'm going to get a headache.
You're not going to see clearly. You're going to get a headache. You might trip over the furniture. It doesn't matter that the glasses are high quality or that they worked for me. The prescription, the context is wrong for your eyes.
That is the perfect visual for this. And yet the self-help industry is essentially a giant store selling one prescription of glasses. Let's call it the hustle prescription to millions of people with millions of different eyes. And the source is telling us, stop trying to force your eyes to adjust to the glasses. That will just damage your vision. You need to find a prescription that fits your own unique constraints.
But it's so hard, isn't it? Because the universal prescription is sold so persuasively. Just do this one thing. It really appeals to our desire for a shortcut.
It does. And that brings us to the hidden variables that really mess up the prescription. The source highlights timing as a critical variable that almost always gets stripped away.
Yes, let's deep dive into timing. This was one of my favorite parts of the analysis because it explains so much about why proven strategies just fall flat. The core idea here is that the when matters more than the what.
The when is the soil that the what grows in. If the soil changes, the seed won't grow. It doesn't matter how good the seed is. Let's look at this from a macro level. So historical timing. This is where advice can go from genius to disastrous just because a few years have passed.
Give us a historical example, something really tangible.
Okay, think about investment advice. If you pick up a best-selling financial book written in, say, 1980, a classic of the genre, it might tell you that the safest, most surefire way to build wealth is to buy a modest home, pay it off as fast as possible, and hold it for 30 years.
Right, the American dream.
And it might tell you to keep your emergency fund in a savings account because interest rates were, arguably, much higher back then. Sometimes they were in the double digits.
Which was incredible advice in 1980. You could make real money just letting it sit in the bank.
Right. But if you apply that exact same logic in a market like we've seen recently, where interest rates fluctuate wildly, housing inventories at historic lows, and wages haven't kept up with property values, that safe advice might actually trap you. If you keep money in a savings account yielding 0.01% while inflation is at 5%, you aren't saving. You are losing purchasing power every single day.
So the strategy didn't change.
The strategy, saving didn't change. The timing, the economic environment did completely.
It's like the people who say, just walk into the manager's office, give him a firm handshake, and ask for a job.
Yes, exactly. That worked in 1955. My grandfather probably did that. But try that today in a high-security corporate building.
You won't get past the lobby.
You won't get a job. You'll get escorted out by security. You might get arrested. The context of hiring norms has shifted completely. The firm handshake advice is context stripped. It ignores the rise of HR departments, digital applications, and security protocols.
What about micro-timing, like the timing of your own life? Because I feel like we often compare Court Chapter 1 to someone else's Chapter 20.
That's even more important. The source alludes to the stage of the listener's life. Advice that is perfect for a 22-year-old single person like take big risks, work 18 hours a day, travel the world with a backpack, live on ramen to save money, is often terrible advice for a 45-year-old with a mortgage, 2 kids, and high blood pressure.
But we often see the 45-year-old beating themselves up because they can't hustle like the 22-year-old guru on TikTok.
Correct. And vice versa. Advice for wealth preservation. Be conservative, diversify, protect your downside, might be terrible for someone just starting out who needs to grow aggressive capital.
Right, you have nothing to preserve yet.
If you apply stage 4 advice, preservation, to a stage 1 problem, creation, you will fail. You'll stagnate. You'll be protecting nothing.
There's a connection here to something that's usually called survivor bias, right? Sure. The text doesn't use that exact phrase, but it feels like it's lurking in the background of this whole timing discussion.
It absolutely is. This is crucial for you, the listener, to understand. When we look at successful people, we are often looking at people who did the right thing at the right time. We are looking at the survivors of a specific timing window. Think about the early days of the App Store, or the early days of YouTube, or the Bitcoin boom.
Oh, totally. If you started a faceless gaming channel on YouTube in 2011, you could grow to 1 million subscribers just by posting consistently.
Right.
The supply of content was so low and demand was exploding. You just had to be there.
Right. So that person, let's call him Gamer Guy, becomes a millionaire. He writes a book called How to Dominate YouTube. You buy it in 2024. You follow his instructions perfectly. You post every day. You use the same tags. You play the same games. And you get 12 views. Why?
Because everyone is doing it now. The ocean is red. The opportunity is gone.
Exactly. The timing window that allowed his success has closed. The algorithm changed. The competition changed. Gamer Guy has succeeded because of a specific temporal advantage. He was early. But in his book, he probably doesn't say step 1, be early in 2011.
No, he says step 1, work hard.
He attributes his success to his effort, which is internal and repeatable, rather than the timing, which is external and unrepeatable.
Precisely. And that is the danger. We can mimic the effort, but we cannot mimic the timing.
We can't.
So the challenge for the listener here is to ask a really hard question. Is this advice true right now, or was it true then?
You have to be a historian of the advice you are consuming. You have to place it on a timeline.
That requires a lot of critical thinking. It's much harder than just following the steps.
It is harder, but it's the only way to avoid the trap.
Let's pivot to the second major pillar of our deep dive, incentives. This is the one that makes people a little uncomfortable, I think, but we have to go there.
We have to.
We have to follow the money.
We have to. The source explicitly mentions that advice becomes distorted when removed from incentives. This is the classic principal-agent problem from economics.
Okay.
The person giving the advice, the agent, has different interests than the person receiving it, the principal.
So when we hear advice, we need to ask, who is talking and what do they want from me?
It sounds cynical, but I prefer to call it media literacy. You have to analyze the advice giver. Why is this advice being given? Is it purely altruistic? Sometimes. I'd like to think most people want to help. But often the advice is a marketing vehicle. It is content marketing.
Give us a scenario where incentives warp the advice.
Okay, imagine someone selling a course on passive income. Their incentive is to sell the course to as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
To do that, they need to convince you that passive income is easy, accessible, and quick. They need you to believe that you can do it with no experience.
Make money while you sleep. Just 4 hours a week.
Right. Now, if they told you the nuanced truth, that true passive income usually requires years of upfront active work, significant capital to invest, and a very high risk of failure, would you buy the course?
Probably not. I'd keep my $997.
Exactly. The nuance kills the conversion rate. So the incentive structure forces them to strip the context. They must simplify the advice to make the sale. The conflict is between what is good for the giver clicks, engagement, authority, sales, and what is good for the receiver, which is nuance, slow progress, specific adaptation.
It's misaligned. The giver gets paid for the promise of the result, not the result itself. If I buy the diet book and don't lose weight, the author still keeps my money.
And this creates what we could call the recycled quotes economy. The source mentions recycled quotes. Why do we see the same generic quote shared over and over again on LinkedIn and Instagram?
You mean like, work hard, play hard, follow your passion?
Be a lion, not a sheep.
Because they get likes.
Because the incentive of social media algorithms is engagement. Nuance doesn't go viral. A 3-paragraph explanation of how to balance risk in a volatile market that gets 0 likes.
It's too dense. It's boring.
It's boring. A picture of a lion with the text, "Be a king," gets 1 million likes because it triggers a quick emotional hit. So the market is flooded with junk food advice because that is what the algorithm rewards.
That is wild. We're essentially consuming an informational diet of candy because the people feeding us are paid by the sugar industry.
That is a fantastic analogy. And just like a sugar diet ruins your physical health, a diet of context-stripped advice ruins your decision-making health. You feel good for a second, you get that dopamine hit of, yes, I'm going to be a lion. But you have 0 nutritional content to actually build your life with. You starve to death on a full stomach of quotes.
I want to push on this a bit more.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where the incentive is aligned? Or should we just trust everyone?
That's a fair question. Incentives can be aligned. For example, if you hire a personal trainer and you pay them per session, and you only keep going if you see results.
Okay.
Their incentive is aligned with your success. If you fail, they lose a client. But in the mass media advice world, books, podcasts, social media, the transaction usually happens before the result.
Right. I buy the book before I try the advice.
That's where the distortion happens.
So we've identified the trap. We know about context stripping, we know about the timing problem, and we know about the incentive problem. It feels a bit daunting, honestly, like navigating a minefield.
It can be.
Right.
But knowing where the mines are is the first step to crossing the field. Ignorance isn't bliss here. Ignorance is dangerous.
So how do we move to the solution? How does the listener stop following the script and start finding their own personal variables?
This is the shift from passive to active. The source encourages us to identify our personal constraints. And I love that word, constraints. Usually in the self-help world, we think of constraints as bad things. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. The gurus tell us to ignore our constraints or crush them.
Right. No excuses. If you wanted it, you'd find the time. Sleep faster. That kind of thing.
But the source says, no, don't ignore them. Audit them. Use them. Your constraints are your reality.
Okay.
If you have chronic back pain, that is a constraint. It's not an excuse. It's a biological reality. If you have to care for aging parents, that is a constraint. If you live in a rural area with slow internet, that is a constraint.
So instead of trying to pretend those things don't exist so we can fit into the universal rule, we flip it.
We use the constraints to filter the advice. And this brings us to the concept of the N1 experiment.
N equals 1. Explain that for us.
In science, N stands for the sample size. If you are testing a new drug, you want N to be 10,000 people. You want a huge sample size to find the average result. You want the universal rule. But for your life, N1. You are the only subject. You are the only sample. I love that. It makes me feel like a scientist in a lab coat, but the lab is my living room.
It should. And here's why that is a relief, as you mentioned earlier. If you are running an experiment and the data comes back negative, you haven't failed.
Right.
You've just proven a hypothesis wrong.
That is such a heavy weight to put down. It's not, I'm a failure. It's, the data came back negative.
Exactly. This routine doesn't work for a person with my commute. Okay, note the data and move on. It removes the moral judgment from productivity. It separates your self-worth from the strategy. It allows you to be objective about your own life.
So let's get into the practical framework the source gives us. We need a way to process the incoming data. The source gives us 3 words: ignore, adapt, discard. Let's walk through these one by one. First up, ignore.
This is your first line of defense. You need to learn when to completely block out advice. Based on what we discussed, you should ignore advice when the incentives are clearly misaligned or the environment is fundamentally different. So if a crypto influencer is telling me to mortgage my house to buy some new coin, and I know their incentive is to pump the price so they can dump their own bags.
Ignore. Do not pass go. Do not even consider it. Do not analyze it. It is noise.
Okay.
Or let's take a less malicious example. If someone gives you parenting advice based on their experience raising kids in the 1970s with a stay-at-home partner, and you are a single parent in 2024 working 2 jobs, you can politely nod, smile, but mentally you press the ignore button. It's not relevant data for your N1 experiment.
It's like spam email. You don't read it and think, maybe I should send my bank details to this prince. You just delete it.
Exactly.
We need a spam filter for advice.
Perfect. A mental spam filter. If the context doesn't match, it goes in the trash.
Next up is adapt. This seems like the most useful one for most people.
Yes, this is the sweet spot. This is where real learning happens. This is where you stop being a robot and start being a strategist.
This is taking the universal rule and tweaking it for my situation.
Yes. You take the principle, but change the tactic. Let's go back to the billionaire morning routine. The principle is start the day with intention and focus.
Right.
That is a solid principle. The tactic was 2 hours of meditation and sauna.
Okay, I can't do the tactic. That's impossible for me. But I like the principle. I want intention in my morning.
So you adapt, given your constraints, your baby, your commute maybe, intention and focus. Looks like 10 minutes of no phone time while you drink your coffee in the car in the parking lot before walking into work. You achieved the principle, but you adapted the execution to fit your context.
That feels doable. It's not all or nothing. It's customized.
Customization is key.
Yeah.
You are tailoring the suit to fit you rather than trying to change your body to fit the suit. Most people try to change the body. They try to change their entire life to fit the habit. It almost never works.
No.
Change the habit to fit the life.
And finally, the third one, the hardest one, I think. Discard.
This is tough because of the sunk cost fallacy. We hold on to bad advice because we've already invested so much time and energy in it.
Right.
We've been trying to make this business model work for 3 years. We've been trying to follow this specific diet for 6 months. We bought the equipment. We told our friends about it.
And admitting it doesn't work feels like admitting waste.
Yeah.
It feels like admitting defeat.
It does. But the source argues that you must be willing to discard advice that consistently yields frustration. If you have adapted it and you have checked the timing and you have audited the incentives and it still leads to a dead end, stop walking.
There's a fear there, though, isn't there? If I discard the map, am I not just lost? If I stop following the diet, won't I get unhealthy? If I stop following the business plan, won't I go broke?
You were already lost. You were just staring at a map that didn't match the territory. You were walking off a cliff while looking at a GPS that said turn left.
Wow.
Discarding the false map is the first step to actually looking at the ground in front of you and finding your own way.
Wow. You were already lost. That hits hard. So to synthesize this, the ultimate skill we are trying to build here isn't finding better advice.
No.
We don't need a better guru. We don't need a newer book.
No. The ultimate skill is becoming a better filter. It is developing the confidence to say, this applies to me, this needs tweaking, and this is garbage, regardless of how famous or successful the person giving the advice is.
It's taking ownership.
Complete ownership. You are the expert on your own life context. No guru knows your variables better than you do. No one knows your bank account, your energy levels, your family dynamics, your local economy better than you.
That is incredibly empowering. We've gone from feeling like failures for not measuring up to realizing we were just using the wrong measuring stick the whole time.
And that is the context trap. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll look at every tweet, every book, every podcast differently. You'll see the stripped context everywhere. You'll see the timing errors. You'll spot the incentives.
It's like putting on those They Live sunglasses where you see the subliminal messages.
Yes, exactly. But instead of obey, the message is usually buy my course.
So before we wrap up, I want to recap where we've been on this. We started with that frustration of the failed blueprint. We unpacked context stripping, how advice gets compressed and loses its nuance. We looked at the dangers of mimicry and the invisible variables.
We deep dived into timing, how the when is more important than the what and incentives how the why distorts the message. And finally, we gave you the N1 strategy: ignore, adapt, discard.
It's been a journey, and I think for everyone listening, there's a lot of mental decluttering to do. There are a lot of shoulds we need to sweep out of the house.
I agree, and I want to leave the listener with a final thought, a bit of a challenge to take with them.
Let's hear it.
Think about the one piece of advice you've been beating yourself up for failing to follow. Maybe it's about your health, your career, your savings. You've been telling yourself you're lazy or undisciplined. I want you to ask, what if the failure wasn't a lack of discipline? What if it was a conflict of context? What specific variable in your life did that advice ignore?
Okay.
And finally, what would happen if you gave yourself permission to discard it today? Just let it go.
That is a powerful permission slip.
Yeah.
To just drop the rock you've been carrying.
Drop the rock, look at your own path, run your own experiment.
I love that. Listeners, thank you for diving deep with us today. It's time to stop copying and start filtering. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Stay curious.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.